What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you another installment of our weekly ranking series we do over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel. So we're going into week 15, big semifinals week, semifinals for both of us in our own home leagues, our leagues that we care the most about. We're heading out trying to make that championship. I'm sure all of you at home are in the same circumstance. So anyways, Corey, are you excited for week 15?
Yeah, let's get a W in the chat if you had Darren Waller going on Thursday. That was very nice. So just a quick note, I said this on the Start Sit show, I'll say it again. We're going to temper our rankings. Normally we would say you could start a guy that's like our wide receiver 38, but because this is the semifinals, there's only like 4 teams left probably in your league. We're going to like shrink the range down. So don't be starting like our 18th ranked quarterback type of thing. Don't be starting like our 32nd ranked running back type of thing. Hopefully you have better options than that. And we're just going to be kind of shrinking down our parameters for who we can start and who we can sit. I just figured I'd go over that because your field of play has definitely decreased with there only being like 4 teams left in the playoffs.
For sure. I mean, if you're in that top 4, typically you should have better options than our 32 ranked running back or 18th ranked quarterback, as you said. But yeah, it's an exciting time in fantasy football. This is really the time where it'll separate the top teams from the average. It'll separate the cream of the crop from the stock.
The people that just sneaked into the playoffs like me in one of my 4 leagues.
Talking about sneaking in the playoffs, I went from the 6th seed to I won my first matchup. Now I'm playing the 2 seed in this round, and literally the projections are like even. Like we're deadlocked in the heat of a matchup. So if I can go from 6th seed to championship appearances, that'll be a pretty good look for my part. But anyways, we're talking about the rankings, our own discrepancies from ECR and each other. Before we do that, though, gonna hit the intro. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to start off with the quarterbacks, the biggest discrepancies we have at the quarterback position. Corey, you can start us off. Who's your biggest discrepant from ECR, if you will, at the quarterback position?
Okay, so the guy I'm highest on compared to ECR is Daniel Jones. I didn't expect to be high on Daniel Jones. I have him at quarterback 20 right now. I didn't feel that high on him, but they have shown that the Cleveland defense has shown that they can be beaten through the air. And Daniel Jones not necessarily having like great receiving options. Obviously, we can probably all recognize the fact that the Giants probably need to upgrade the receivers, but they are bad through the air, ranking number 7th easiest against the quarterback position. And as Lamar showed, they can be beaten on the ground as well. Not that Daniel Jones is as good of a runner as Lamar Jackson, but he can definitely pick up some yards on the ground. And he's now 2-3 weeks off of his hamstring injury. So hopefully he's going to run a bit more than he did last week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like Jones as well.
I still probably wouldn't start him, just to be clear, though. I think you should have better options than him.
Now, if it's a super flex or so, okay, then you can temper your expectations accordingly at that point. But heck, in a super flex, you're probably already relying on him as a weekly starter. So that's fine. I actually did my rankings with the assumption that Colt McCoy was playing. So if Daniel Jones is playing, he's probably
he is going to play. He's expected.
So he is expected to play. So as you can see on the screen, like my rankings would have shown by now, he's probably going to be just ahead of Drew Lock, right around Matt Ryan in that 23-24 type area. So again, I would still be higher than consensus on him then.
Part of it could be because they expected him not to play in this game, why they're lower on him. They have him at quarterback 32, which I imagine is because he wasn't expected to play. But he played last week, so he didn't get hurt. He didn't get re-aggravated his injury. He got benched because he was bad.
That's fair. I'm going to start off with the guy that I'm high on, and that's going to be Deshaun Watson, quarterback from the Houston Texans. Again, not a huge discrepancy, only 4 spots, but ECR has him at 10, and I actually have him at 6, and I understand it fully. Okay, the matchup is tough. Indianapolis Colts defense generally throughout the year has been a tough team against really any position, quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end. Heck, they're just a good overall fundamental defense led by my Eberflus, oddly enough, used to be the Cowboys linebackers coach. Little fun fact. Anyways, the matchup is tough, but I mean, Watson did just fine against the same defense 2 weeks ago. Not to mention, Brandin Cooks is going to be back for this game. Brandin Cooks being back is huge for that offense being able to.
He missed almost 2 quarters of that game.
Being able to stretch that defense out. Not to mention, I mean, we're talking about David Johnson as well being back. And while that may not affect the overall efficiency in the ground. What it does do, it gives Deshaun Watson another outlet in the passing game because we know that he's lacking weapons right now. You got Brandin Cooks back. You're getting David Johnson back. You're adding 2 weapons in the pass game as well. And this is still a guy who has averaged 8 rushing attempts and 37 rushing yards per game since his bye week. I mean, even if the Colts realistically play the Texans well through the air, we've seen Deshaun Watson before. He can play hero ball. He can get those yards on his own. He can get rushing scores. I mean, this is just a superstar overall, and I don't bet against those guys. So ECR having him outside their top 8, I think is just kind of low. I have him at 6 because I still think this is Deshaun Watson. This is quarterback 6 points per game per year. This is a bona fide fantasy football superstar. And if you're going to rely on someone to win you a semifinal matchup, you're going to rely on the right arm of a guy in Deshaun Watson who can absolutely explode on any given week. So I'm not betting against this guy.
No, I'm not either. I have him at 8, so I'm higher on consensus for him as well. But my only concern with David Johnson coming back is in this game, the last time they played, Deshaun Watson scored a rushing touchdown, and it actually occurred on like inside the 10-yard line too. And if David Johnson is back, that could be a situation where David Johnson gets that rushing touchdown instead of Deshaun Watson.
That's fair.
And obviously, if Deshaun Watson didn't get that rushing touchdown last time, he only had like a 20-point day. If he doesn't get a rushing touchdown, he only has like a 14-point day, and then he's definitely more disappointing. So that's my only concern with Deshaun Watson is that he needs to get it done through the air. I don't think he's going to get a rushing touchdown in this game with David Johnson back. But nonetheless, I still think he's a fine start, and I am higher than ECR on him. Another guy I'm slightly higher than ECR on is Teddy Bridgewater. I'm not overly excited about him either. He's in that borderline streamable range for me. If he's that guy that if you're not comfortable playing a guy like Mitch Trubisky, I think you could rely on someone like Teddy Bridgewater. He gets DJ Moore back for this one, which is a big deal for him because, I mean, basically what you're looking for out of Teddy Bridgewater is his receivers to do the work for him because DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, all these guys can do things after the catch. And we've seen that pretty much all season. We had DJ Moore house like 75-yard touchdowns and all that kind of stuff. All that production goes to a guy like Teddy Bridgewater. So I think Teddy Bridgewater in a pinch, if you needed to stream him, I think you could. He is currently my quarterback 17, just behind Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger. So I would start Brees, Roethlisberger, Derek Carr, unfortunately, who sprained his groin or whatever he did last night, Mitch Trubisky, Jalen Hurts. I'd start all those guys above Teddy Bridgewater, but I would start Bridgewater over a guy like Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Daniel Jones, some of the other Baker Mayfield, some of the other lower options like that.
Yeah, for sure. The next guy I'm actually going to mention is going to be Mitch Trubisky, quarterback from the Chicago Bears. I have him 4 spots out of consensus. And I mean, he's played really well from like an actual real life NFL football standpoint these past 3 games in the absence of Nick Foles, obviously. And now he gets a league average Minnesota Vikings defense in general. I mean, they're league average against the run, they're league average against the pass. Now, why do I mention their league average against the run? He's gotten absolutely vultured by David Montgomery's success in the ground these past 3 games. But the reason why David Montgomery was having such
success like the 4 worst run defenses in the league.
Yeah, the last 3 games, 30th, 31st, and 32nd ranked defenses against opposing running backs. I mean, the Vikings aren't great against the run. They're about league average, but
they're better than the Texans.
Better than the Packers. Compared to what he was playing against, realistically, David Montgomery should see some type of defense in his way, if you will. And if that's going to be the case, I mean, we saw 2 weeks ago, the Bears had 3 rushing touchdowns from inside the 10-yard line. If any of those are a passing score, Trubisky puts up a solid.
Trubisky can run those in too. If they run like a play action boot or something, Trubisky can run it into the end zone. We've seen him do that before. As well, which is why I would. Are you good on Mitch Trubisky? Because I kind of want to transition into a guy I'm lower on too.
I was just going to quickly mention. I mean, like with more on his plate, he should be able to do more from a volume standpoint. Given that David Montgomery's not going to average 10 yards a rush in this game.
Yeah, pretty much. And the reason I'm higher on a guy like Mitch Trubisky than I am on a guy like Phillip Rivers, who I have 5 spots lower than consensus, is I still don't believe in the guy. I still don't think he's very good. 2, it's a good matchup for Phillip Rivers through the air against the Texans defense. But again, it's a better matchup for Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines on the ground. So I expect those 2 running backs, predominantly and hopefully Jonathan Taylor for both of our sakes, to be the one to score the touchdowns and Rivers to have like a 220-yard, 1 touchdown game, which for a guy who doesn't run like compared to Mitch Trubisky is like 12 points. And that's not going to get it done for you in your fantasy matchup. And I'm hoping that that's what happens because I have to play up against Phillip Rivers in the matchup that I'm going in my home league. So hopefully he has a bad game. I kind of think he will.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I have him a little bit higher than you, but again, I still have him 2 spots lower than consensus. So I agree with you there and having
He's
him
up at like
lower.
13 in consensus,
Yeah,
isn't he?
yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't like
think
that's just too high to me.
I think I have him at about 16 right now. I don't know. The viewers are going to see on the screen.
I'm
Either way.
pretty sure everyone with two eyes knows that Jonathan Taylor is going to dissect this run defense. Like I'm
Jonathan
pretty
Taylor's
sure
going to get
everyone
30
knows that, so I don't know why people are higher on Phillip Rivers.
for sure. Next guy I'm going to mention is going to be Cam Newton. You talk about legs. I mean, this guy's got legs for days. Yes, I know Cam has.
You can't start Cam Newton though.
No, you can't start him. But I mean, compared to where he's been, like ranked, he's ranked at 23. Like, I still think like you have to have this guy in the top 20 because although yes, he struggled in 2 of the last 3 games and he faces a tough D on paper. I mean, this is the same defense that he shredded in week 1, 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. Interdivisional matchup. You know, Bill Belichick's gonna be in his bag in this game, and this is still Cam Newton. Where realistically, on any given week, given the rushing upside he has, he can absolutely win you a matchup. So if you're in the semifinal and it's a 1 quarterback league, you're not starting him. But again, if you're in a super flex and you have to start him, don't expect the output to be as low as a lot of people in the ECR are expecting this week because 23 is just absurd in my opinion.
I am at 25, so I agree with them.
We're gonna have to make.
I don't mess with the Dolphins defense, dude, and especially not with Cam Newton, who Cam Newton has been wildly inconsistent.
We'll make that a bet then.
Yeah, like I just don't trust Cam Newton, especially not at this point in the season.
Who do you want versus Cam?
Who do I want versus Cam? Who do I have ahead of him? I have Tua ahead of him in this very game.
I'll take that in a heartbeat. Let's do it.
Okay. One guy that I want to mention before we get into the next position, unless you have anyone else that we got to talk about.
2 more that I'm just lower on.
Okay, here you run through yours real quick, and then I'll go through my last one.
I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, I have 8 lower than consensus. I mean, he hasn't crossed 20 fantasy points in his last 5 games, despite having some favorable matchups in there. I mean, the Jaguars, out of all teams, were in there, and then the 3rd worst team against the pass. Yes, he faces the same Cincinnati team that he shredded in week 10, but this is a Cincinnati team who, since then, has lost their starting quarterback and any real resemblance of an offense in general. With no pressure at all coming from the opposing side, this Steelers defense should dominate. And if that's the case, if the Steelers defense is dominating,
the Steelers defense.
Oh, I have the Steelers defense. It's nice.
I gotta face them, which I don't like.
The Steelers defense is going to dominate early on. We both know that. And if James Conner gets going early, realistically, from a volume perspective,
that's not going to happen
in this game.
James Conner ain't getting going. Maybe Benny Snell or something.
All right, Steelers run game.
I think this is just a non-competitive game whatsoever. I think the Steelers just wipe the floor with them.
From a game script perspective, from a competitive standpoint, like it's not even close. Not to mention the Steelers are coming off 2 straight losses. You don't think they're going to want to rectify things against a terrible Cincinnati team that's going for the 3rd overall pick right now? And anyways, last one I'm going to mention real quick before you get into your last one. Matt Ryan, 4 spots lower than consensus. It's as easy as this. No Julio Jones, he's going to be lower. It's just a thing. I mean, he's quarterback 23 for me. And you actually look at his career without Julio Jones versus with Julio Jones. He averages 17.62 points per game without Julio Jones, and that number jumps up to 21.48 with Julio Jones. Yes,
it's a bigger difference this year too.
Oh, and the difference this year is ridiculous. It's almost double. 12.06 without him. 22.71 with him. I mean, that's going to be a factor when you're losing one of the top 5 receivers, in my opinion, of all time or so. Like top 8, we'll say.
Yeah.
Either way. I mean, he's going to struggle. As much as I love Russell Gage, I'm going to get into. Russell Gage is not Julio Jones. And simply put, he's a back-end quarterback 2 at best, and you are not putting him in your lineup for your fantasy football semifinals. Plain and simple.
Yeah. I talked about Matt Ryan on the start sit thing. I basically said the Bucs have been somewhat of a favorable matchup to fantasy quarterbacks the past couple of weeks, but the teams that did well against the Bucs were teams that had great pass protection, which the Falcons do not have. And we saw that last week with the Vikings. They Kirk Cousins was just under so much pressure that he couldn't even function in offense. And Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and those guys disappointed. The teams that dissected the Bucs were all top 10 in terms of pass protection, according to PFF, like the Rams and the Saints and the Chiefs. So I don't expect Matt Ryan to have a great game. I think he's going to be under complete duress in this game. Another guy, speaking of Kirk Cousins, I have him 6 spots lower than consensus. And the reason is because of the same exact reasoning he did bad last week. He's playing the Bears this week. He's going to be under pressure constantly again. And I don't expect the Bears to get a whole lot going on offense. That makes me a little concerned for the receivers in this game. It is a divisional matchup, so hopefully they're able to keep it more competitive than they were against the Bucs, because I mean, aside from the first couple quarters where they were running the ball at will, they just couldn't move the ball through the air against Tampa Bay, which had been a weakness of Tampa Bay's defense for the past couple of weeks before last week.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you there as well. Anyways, anything else you want to touch up on quarterbacks before we move on? And we'll try to get through these a little faster moving forward.
Yeah, I actually don't have too many differences in running backs, so I can run through those a little quicker.
I have a good amount, but I'll start off like these ones in particular are pretty easy for me. They're guys we basically talk about every week, except for Melvin Gordon's sake. I was higher on him last week. I'm not much lower on him this week. And simply put, you're looking at his body of work across his 8 games. You can't ignore it. 4 of his last 8 games he has played in less than 8 half PPR points. That's just not going to suffice as an RB2, plain and simple. This is a guy who's a more of a touchdown dependent type RB3 profile rather than the RB2 that ECR really wants to have him at. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. He's so volatile week to week. Yes, he had a great matchup last week. Did diddly squat with it. So Melvin Gordon, to me, obviously the name value, because we've seen what he was able to do in past experiences in past years, people are always going to have him a little higher than realistically what his play should be, which is going to be similar to another guy I'm going to mention, may or may not play for my favorite team. But Melvin Gordon, he's more of the RB30 than he is the RB21 that ECR currently has him at.
Yeah, I agree. I'm lower on Melvin Gordon than I was last week. And did we make a bet about Melvin Gordon? I think we did, didn't we?
Yeah. He still outscored McKissick, though.
Oh, right. Yeah. So either way, so the next guy that I am 9 spots higher than consensus on this guy, and that's DeAndre Swift. He's currently my RB8 right now. The first game for Swift, coming off of a multi-week injury, was last week. Obviously, he came off of a concussion where I believe he missed like 3 or 4 games. He's really that guy this week that I think is more of a projection. Obviously, we don't know for sure that he's going to return to his full workload, but I do think he gets back to it. We saw him last week have a good workload. He still had over 50% of the snaps, ran all the routes pretty much for the running backs, got most of the touches, and he's going up against the Titans defense that is allowing the single most receptions and receiving yards to running backs over the past 5 games. I really like Swift to bounce back in this one and potentially see a bunch of the usage that he saw prior to his concussion, especially with no Stafford on the other side on his team. I think we're going to see a lot of Swift on the ground, and Chase Daniel will probably check it down to him a lot in the passing game. I think he's going to have a pretty safe floor in this game, and I think he has a good chance to break a long one or just catch a lot of balls and rack up the PPR points.
For sure. I agree with you. I actually have him a little bit higher than consensus as well. Guy I'm going to mention on, again, a couple guys I'm just going to name off real quick because they kind of all fall into the same group. First of all, Ezekiel Elliott, similar to Melvin Gordon. I mean, he's a touchdown-dependent RB3. Don't let his name value dictate what his value would be in fantasy football compared to where he should be ranked. He's currently the ECR RB19. If you ask me when's the last time we've really seen consistent RB2 production from him, I can't tell you, because every time we watch the Cowboys game, he's phased out right away because that team.
He went from like a mid RB1 with Dak to like a back end RB2 right away.
He was a high end RB1, dude.
Like, but Dak, he went like it was. He didn't even have a period where he was like a mid RB2 or like a low end RB1. Like he just went from a high end mid RB1 to a low end RB2 right away.
To really analyze the factor of Dak, okay. In the first 5 games of this season, Ezekiel Elliott was averaging 20 half PPR points per game and 6.4 targets per game, which would be, over the course of the season, the RB3. He went from
which is basically what you were expecting, and we were dead on. We said he was one of the safest players in fantasy this year. Had Dak stayed healthy, he probably would have been a top 5 running back like he was when Dak was on the field, and we would have been like, yeah, of course he was, because that's what Zeke does every year.
For sure. And like I quote tweeted on Twitter, there was like a thing saying, oh yeah, projecting like the first round for next year, the locks of the first round. It was like CMC, Barkley, Chubb, Adams, Hill, McCaffrey, Henry, yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, you're seriously not going to mention Zeke.
I don't think he's a lock for the first round.
He's getting his 2 all-pro tackles back and his.
I'm telling you, man, he's not going to be a locked first-round pick. I think he's going to be a back end of the first, high-end second-round pick.
And if he falls there, you scoop up that value every time, and you thank the rest of your league, because that is
not going to be me, dude.
I will bet you on that so hard.
I will too, but we're a very ageist YouTube channel. We don't like old running backs, and Zeke is getting to that point where he's becoming an old running back. So he might be a guy if he is still that. I think I need to get him in the 3rd round for me to want him. Yeah.
Good. Okay,
I think there's risk there, man. I think there's risk.
I'll take my late first round value and take it to the
Go
bank.
ahead.
This guy's gonna be a top
People
4
said that
running back.
about Todd Gurley this year.
Zeke is not Todd Gurley though.
I know he's not Todd Gurley. I'm just saying you can see a somewhat similar situation. I know it's not like
okay, but Todd Gurley just sucked. Zeke had to lose his whole offensive line and starting quarterback to look terrible.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's gonna be bad. I just want a bit more of a discount than still having to pay a first round pick for the dude.
Either way, I like him next year. I hate him this year. Why is he RB19 and ECR this year without that offensive line and without that quarterback? Makes no sense. Anyways, going to quickly mention these two guys because they're kind of similar. They're both kind of, I don't want to cross. I mean, Singletary, is he a scat back?
He's bad.
He's basically a scat back.
Like, I saw someone tweet out that he has like 1 touchdown over his last like
256 attempts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, plain and simple, you mentioned it. This is a committee back who doesn't have the long speed to break a long touchdown.
And doesn't get any goal line work.
Doesn't have the size to get goal line work. So realistically, what are we projecting from him? Like ECR has him as a top 30 back. Like, no, thank you. I'd rather start so many other options than him. And then Nyheim Hines. I mean, I actually like him a good amount more than Singletary. I think he's a fine mid-tier type RB3. But why does ECR have him as a top 24 back? I don't know. I'll never know. Either way, weekly rant, don't rank scat backs in your top 24. You can go with your next guy.
This is kind of a 2-for-1 because it's the same backfield. Raheem Mostert to have 49 spots higher than consensus. I think that they just haven't caught up yet to the fact that Raheem Mostert is going to play. He practiced yesterday and he practiced, I believe, in full today. So he is expected to play. Kyle Shanahan said he's okay. And subsequently, I have Jeff Wilson 8 spots lower than consensus at RB30. I think he is still playable, but this backfield's pretty clear to me. I think Raheem Mostert has the clear primary ball carrier role. And then Jeff Wilson looks to be the like short yardage, potential goal line back. And then they kind of split 50-50 the passing work. Mostert is the explosive guy, which is the reason I like him better this week to consensus, is because the Dallas Cowboys, and you know this for a fact, they are allowing explosive runs at a very, very high rate. We saw Antonio Gibson get a number of them on Thanksgiving. We saw Lamar Jackson get one a couple weeks ago. They just, once you're to the second level, you're home free. And especially for a guy like Raheem Mostert, who's probably the fastest running back in the NFL.
Yeah, all you have to do is run past a Jalen Smith who's probably facing the wrong way, to be quite honest. I'm not sure if you saw that replay. He was
going run a motion before the play to confuse Van Der Esch, and you're good.
He was okay. Jalen Smith is going for a run play, right? Gets tangled up with the blocker. He turns his back completely to the offense, and the running back runs straight to the hole that he was just in. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, oh my God, man.
Yeah. So Raheem Mostert, I talked about him on the Start Sit show. I said he was my start of the week. I still think this is the game that he gets a very long touchdown, 75-yarder or something like that to the house. I think this is the time that Raheem Mostert does it. So make sure you do not sit him in such a great matchup. I know Gio Bernard and them couldn't take advantage of it last week, but come on, it's Gio Bernard and Samaje Perine. What did you expect?
That's fair. Next guy I'm going to mention, I have David Johnson actually 9 spots ahead of ECR. I currently have him as ECR 19 or my 19. ECR has him at 28. Sorry about that wording. Anyways, David Johnson has basically been good for 10 points in every game he's played the first to fourth quarter in. I mean, obviously the one game that he left early had 1.6. We're not really counting that because realistically, again, he left in the first quarter. But in all but one game that he's played the whole game in, he's had 10 to 12 half PPR points aside from the game where he actually had 18 against the Chiefs week 1. Anyways, he's consistent. You know what you're going to get from him. He's going to give you a solid RB2, 10 to 12 points each week. And with Houston's lack of passing weapons this week, I mean, Brandin Cooks realistically is their only established receiver. You want to hype up Kiki QT, Chad Hansen, be my guest, but they fucking suck. David Johnson should see an uptick in receiving work in this game, as we saw kind of from Deke Johnson just 2 weeks ago. I mean, the matchup isn't great on paper. I know the Colts are a fine run defense, but heck, DJ had 10.4 against them the last time they played. I mean, it's just consistent from this point that you know this guy's going to get you that RB2 type floor. And realistically, given the touch workload we're going to see from him, probably around 12 to 15 type touches in this game, I do think that he can give you that low-end RB2 type value. So I don't understand why he's valued as a RB3 on this week by ECR.
I kind of understand it. Like, he's not good, and this is a bad matchup. That's basically what my thought process is. I understand he's going to get the workload, but like, so is Devin Singletary. Like, I'm not excited about this at all.
At least
I know at least he has an opportunity for a touchdown. Yeah. that's the appealing thing with David Johnson is that but he has to score a touchdown or else he's not going to do anything for you, because it's not like he's going to catch 7 balls or anything like that, because he usually catches like 2 or 3 passes max.
The thing is, though, with how depleted the passing game is for the Texans in terms of weapons, he could catch 7 passes.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I wouldn't put it past the Texans, in all honesty. Like, that's how depleted. Like, Chad Hansen.
I think Watson runs the ball before he throws it to David Johnson 7 times.
Oh, hey, maybe. We'll see. But either way, I mean, 28 is just ridiculous for me because, yes, he probably isn't going to score you a 20 to 25 point week and win you your matchup. I understand that. Again, I'm not a huge David Johnson fan himself, but compared to what he should be giving you in this game, and he should be, if he plays the full game, giving you that 10 to 12 type half PPR output, he's definitely a fine RB2 flex play for you. And you don't get that type of production at RB28 really often. So I think he deserves to be much higher than where he's.
I can't trust the dude in my semifinals. I'm sorry, I can't do it. And there's a good chance that if you drafted David Johnson, you're probably not in your semifinals. You're probably in the consolation finals right now if you drafted him. So
I didn't draft him. I actually ended up getting him in a trade, and he's my second flex. So we're chilling.
Yeah, I mean, like that's about the ceiling I see for him though, is your second flex. He's not your RB2 or your RB3 even. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy that I am higher on than consensus. Basically, what we saw to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and the reason I'm higher on him than consensus, is he had 74% of the snaps last week. He regained his full role, basically. 16 out of 18 of the carries, 24 routes to Bell's 6. And I don't expect him to do too much on the ground. Like, I understand that it's a tough matchup against the Saints, but a couple receptions. He had 5 catches last week and a potential scoring opportunity, a lot of them, in a game where Mahomes and the Chiefs are probably going to have to put up a lot of points. I think that's enough for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be considered like that RB18 range, which is a bit higher than consensus.
Speaking of Le'Veon Bell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, did you hear after the game that Le'Veon Bell was confused that he only got 4 touches? Like, what are you confused about? You're not good.
You mean my 2.1 yards per carry wasn't getting it done?
Man, it's such a joke when you think about that. Anyways, let's stop talking about like these boring backs and guys we're lower on. Realistically, that's all we've really been talking about so far. Let's talk about Alvin Kamara. And I know, okay, screw me, right? I'm talking about a guy that's in the consensus top 7. But having him at ECR 7, they probably haven't caught up to the news of Drew Brees playing back. It's way too low. He's my number 3, and he would be my number 2 if Eckler wasn't locked in at 2 for the Thursday Night Football, by the way. Like, it sucks for the rankings-wise that happens, but I understand why. Anyways, to me, this week, the clear top 2, you can have Kamara at 1 and Henry at 2, or you can have Henry at 1 and Kamara at 2. Any other person at 1 and 2, I'm going to laugh at you for. Let's talk about Kamara, though. And it's just insane what he's going to be able to do this week without MT and with Brees.
Let me get into that real quick, because so Alvin Kamara this year has played 6 games where Michael Thomas has not been in the lineup, but Drew Brees has. And in those games, he averages 28.75 PPR points per game. And no, I know what you're thinking. It's not swayed by touchdowns. He actually has less rushing touchdowns in the 6 games without Michael Thomas than he does in the 7 games with Michael Thomas. In the 6 games without Michael Thomas, he averages 10 targets per game. That's what it is. That's why he has so many points. His rushing volume, his rushing touchdowns, all that's the same, except for the receiving work. And with Drew Brees coming back, it was a good sign to see Alvin Kamara get 10 targets last week, but I think he's going to have upwards of 12, 14, 15 targets this week, literally.
Yeah. For the record, talking about his overall target share, okay? 26.2% target share with Brees in the lineup and with MT missing. 26.2. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, it's wild.
If you're actually putting that into context, if Brees is throwing the ball realistically in a shootout against the Chiefs, we should expect them to throw the ball around 40 to 45 times, hypothetically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That would equate to 11 targets for Alvin Kamara. That's his floor, by the way, because we saw games of upwards of 30, 35, 40% without MT in the lineup. And in a game that realistically they're not going to be relying on guys like Traquan Smith, Emmanuel Sanders, to be honest, is pretty volatile. Brees is going to rely on his best receiver that he has this week. And his best receiver this week is that guy, AK-41, Alvin Kamara. So if you have
had a couple games this season where he's had like 13, 14 targets. And I think this is the type of game that he does that in.
If you have Alvin Kamara and you're in the semifinal, book your finals appearance. because it's
I
going to
really
happen.
hope you're right, because the guy I'm playing, his team is way too good for me to say that. But
Hey, I hope so too. I'm saying that because I have him.
Two guys I just want to mention briefly, and then you can get into whatever running backs you have left. James Robinson, I've talked about it already, but I think the game script against the Ravens is the big issue for me. With James Robinson, I think the Ravens are going to roll them. I think they're going to blow them the hell out. It's going to get ugly real fast, and that might just lead to Chris Thompson being on the field more than we normally see him, or just the abandonment of the run altogether, and they just have to keep throwing the ball. And maybe that means James Robinson gets some checkdowns, but from what we saw last week, that wasn't exactly the case. They did actually take him off the field in obvious passing situations for whatever reason. And then Kareem Hunt, I just don't like the matchup against the Giants. Prior to last week, Kareem Hunt was not a guy who was receiving consistent receiving volume and consistent volume altogether. So I think he belongs in that back end RB2 range where I have him ranked, as opposed to like mid RB2 range where ECR has him.
That's fair. Three guys I'm going to mention last. I mean, I have Keyshawn Vaughn 21 spots ahead of consensus. I mean, Leonard Fournette just isn't Ronald Jones. Like,
no.
Can we stop pretending that he is? He's not. I mean, I don't know.
The Bucks offense, or the offensive line for the Bucks is like dead last in adjusted line yards.
Really?
Yeah. So basically, what Rojo is doing is like impressive, because they're not helping him too much, and I think that should improve. Like over the with Wirfs going into his second year next year and all that kind of stuff. Like I think it's going to get better, but for whatever reason, they just have not been getting a lot of push up front. I think it's probably because of Donovan Smith. That's probably the reason. But
he's out for this game, by the way.
Yeah, and they also were missing Marpet for a number of games and all that kind of stuff, and he's their best run blocker. But either way, Leonard Fournette and Keyshawn Vaughn and LaShawn McCoy, they're all going to share work in this game. I would just advise you not to start any of them personally, but I think Keyshawn Vaughn is a decent stash in case for just some random occurrence where he gets like 20 touches. I don't think that ever happens, and I think Rojo's probably back next week. But or at least I hope so, because he plays the Lions, which is just giddy up. Like, I think Rojo's going to help me win a championship if I make it through this week. Sure. Yeah, I would just stay away from the Bucs backfield altogether if Rojo is not going to play, and that actually hasn't been ruled out yet. To be fair,
I mean, I have him 21 spots ahead of consensus. Does not mean I'm starting him. It's just that ECR has him at like 70. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll take the value there. The last two guys I'm going to mention quickly. I have DeAndre Washington 4 spots ahead of consensus. I mean, the past 2 games that he's played in, 18 opportunities, 17 opportunities, and Gaskin is again out for this week. He does still have a very, very favorable matchup against the New England defense that just allowed Cam Akers to absolutely run wild on them in Thursday Night Football. And speaking of Cam Akers, I have him 3 spots ahead of consensus. I mean, who else is just relieved for the Cam Akers breakout season? I mean, I
think I have him. I initially had Cam Akers a bit higher. I know Cam Akers is great, and he had all these touches and all these like snap shares, 79% of the snaps or whatever. But the Jets are a pass funnel defense. They're better against the run than they are against the pass. And the Rams are passing the ball a lot more than they're running the ball. And last week, the team that they played was the Patriots, who were a lot better against the pass than they were against the run. So I think the amount of volume that Cam Akers saw last week could have been a product of game plan. If you saw and mic'd up, Bill Belichick at the end of the game goes up to Sean McVay and he's like, hey, you guys had a kick-ass game plan or whatever. I think they stick to the passing game this week, and it could be a bad thing for Cam Akers, as he might not get as much volume, but nonetheless, they're going to move the ball on offense, and that could lead to opportunities for scoring for Cam Akers.
Maybe they pass the ball more with a worse Jets defense against the pass than they are against the run. But I'll take the chance on 54 total opportunities in the last 2 games.
Yeah.
2 games, 54 opportunities for Cam Newton. That's basically more than he had for the rest of the season, it seems like.
Probably, yeah. He's like 31 last week.
Now he goes up against a Jets defense who basically reeks like moldy cheese.
Yeah, they kind of suck at everything. When I say they're more of a pass funnel defense, just because they're so bad against the pass that it masks the fact that you can still run on them. Those teams don't do it.
Heck, in my tight end premium league, freaking Darren Waller had 57 points against them a few weeks ago. But I mean, we're talking about this. Okay, like definitely, I think the Rams are going to have a success on both sides, whether it's running the ball and passing the ball. I mean, if they're passing the ball early and efficiency early, all that's going to mean is a lot of Cam Akers grind and crap out of that Jets defense later on. I have him as my running back 8. I understand ECR has him at 11 simply because you don't want to overrank him just yet, because again, it's still only 2 games. But from what I've seen, from the usage I've seen, from the matchup I see in front of me, fire up Cam Akers. And I'm still upset that I don't have him in my home league.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention that anymore.
Cool. Let's get into the wide receivers. You good on running backs?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So into the wide receivers. This is kind of a combo because they're on the same team. DJ Moore, I have 7 spots higher than consensus, and Curtis Samuel, I have 11 spots lower than consensus. DJ Moore came off the COVID list early this week, which indicates to me that he's going to be a full go for this game. If he had come off the COVID list today, for example, I would have been like, oh man, like he probably like is not attuned with the game plan and all that kind of stuff, and they might have a limited role for him. But he came off the COVID list on Tuesday, so I think he should be a full go or at least close to it this week. As a result, I'll trust him as the back end wide receiver too, that he's kind of always been all season. And with him being back, that definitely downgrades Curtis Samuel into more of like a low end flex territory type of starter, just outside my top 30-ish receivers, I think. ECR has him all the way up at like 25, I'm pretty sure, Curtis Samuel, who's actually higher than DJ Moore, which I don't understand. Maybe they just haven't caught up to the news or something, but it happened a while ago, so they should have been caught up to it.
Yeah, my bad. Fully agree there. My bad, a little yawn, but we power through over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange. And speaking of Fantasy Stock Exchange, which is us, if you guys have enjoyed the video thus far, new to the channel, make sure you go hit that subscribe button. And as always, like the video; it helps the YouTube algorithm. Anyways, I'm gonna hop into my first comparison, if you will. That's Kiki QT 9 spots lower and Brandin Cooks 17 spots higher. Okay. I mean, why is Kiki QT the ECR 32? Like, have they not caught up? I'm assuming they haven't caught up to the news that Brandin
No,
Cooks
I don't think they
playing.
have.
But even if Brandin Cooks wasn't playing, what from last week's performance would give you any type of
Got a touchdown?
He had 3 targets.
Yeah.
3 targets and 24 yards. I mean, stop. Like, okay, I get it. He had a good game a couple weeks ago. That's what his only good game in the last 2 years. Like, settle the fuck down, ECR. Why do you have to jump on fucking waves so quickly? And not to mention, I mean, Brandin Cooks, if he's playing, ECR has him at 34. If he's playing, which he is, he's a top 20 receiver. I don't care where you have him. He has to be in your top 20. So, anyways.
Yeah, that's about where I have Cooks as well.
I'm at 17. Or 17 or 19.
No, you have him 17 spots higher than consensus. I'm at 14.
I have him at 17. So, yeah, I split the difference there.
Cool.
Yeah, perfect. Get into your next guy.
Yeah, so T. Higgins, a guy I have 11 spots higher than consensus, and the reason is because the tier of receivers that T. Higgins is in, he is by far, in a way, the safest out of all of them, regardless of his offense, his quarterback play, all that kind of stuff, because T. Higgins, in the past the past 6 games that he's played, he has 8+ targets in 5 of 6. And the game that he didn't have 8+ targets in, he caught a touchdown and had 5 catches. So either way, he is a safe option. Last time he played the Steelers, he went 7 for 115 and a touchdown. I believe Joe Burrow played in that game. So that obviously downticks T. Higgins as a result. But I think he is just by far the safest option in this tier of receivers like Michael Pittman Jr. and all these guys that are really just upside swings. And they have low floors. I think T. Higgins is by far the safest out of all those guys and has an equal ceiling to all those guys too.
Yep, agreed. The next 2 guys I'm actually going to mention, I'm just going to speak of them in conjunction because really I have similar thoughts on them. I don't hate these guys whatsoever. I mean, they're going to be Tim Patrick. They're going to be Cole Beasley. I have 9 and 8 spots lower than consensus, respectively. Again, I don't hate them at all, but ECR 33 for Patrick and ECR 27 for Beasley, it just seems pretty egregious in my opinion. I mean, you want to view them as safe wide receiver, like low-end wide receiver 3 types, okay. But rely on them as high-end, mid-tier type wide receiver 3s that you're going to rank above guys like, as you mentioned, even the T. Higgins. I would
take T. Higgins over both those guys.
Absolutely T. Higgins over, like Jarvis Landry, absolutely over both of them. So I just don't understand why ECR realistically wants to pump these guys up. If you want to have them at like 37, 38, 39 area, okay, I'm fine. But 33 and 27 just seems ridiculous in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just a little too high for those guys. I don't hate as soon as someone has like 2 games in a row, it doesn't matter what their story is, what their background is. If they have 2 games in a row where they're solid, ECR throws them in the top 25. It doesn't make any sense to me. Speaking of guys who've had 2 games in a row where they've looked good and throwing them into the top 25, I have T.Y. Hilton 7 spots lower than consensus. I'm not sold on T.Y. Hilton. I'm just not. We have a full season sample of T.Y. Hilton not being good. And sure, he's been great lately. The past 3 games, he's had either 80 yards and a touchdown in all of those games. But I still think he's startable. Don't get me wrong. But he's just ticketing him automatically for a top 20 performance this week when he's been completely useless up until week 12 of the NFL season is just not something I can do comfortably in the fantasy semifinals. I realize it's a good matchup. I realize he's been hot lately, but let's not pretend like this guy's bust proof.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I have him 3 spots lower than consensus as well. I'm going to quickly mention a guy I have 5 spots lower than consensus. It's going to be Tyler Lockett, or wide receiver from the Seattle Seahawks. Again, we know how much of a death sentence that the Washington football team is as a pass defense against opposing wide receivers.
They
Fourth
have actually
stringent,
been a bit worse lately.
a bit worse lately, but realistically, looking at the whole body of work, like I will say though, they haven't been as stingy per se as they were maybe 3 weeks ago. But either way, I mean, Lockett, we understand his upside on any given week as the overall wide receiver one on the week. But he's actually had his struggles of late. I mean, he has one game of 10 plus half PPR points across his last 7. That's just way too volatile, in my opinion.
I can't sit the
Going,
dude. I
oh,
can't do it.
I'm not sitting
There's
him
because
per se,
I've seen
but
a lot of people ask me questions being like Deontay Johnson or Tyler Lockett. I'm playing Tyler Lockett.
I'm playing Lockett as well. Now I have him at 21. I'm still starting him over guys like, as you mentioned. Okay. I'm still starting him over Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, Juju Smith-Schuster, DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, like those types. But once you get into the guys like even Corey Davis, I would start over him. Robbie
I have
Anderson.
for reference, I have Tyler Lockett all the way up at 16 ahead
Sure.
of Corey Davis, who you mentioned. I have him
Uh,
ahead of actually no, I don't have him ahead of Adam Thielen. I was going to say I had him ahead of him. I have him ahead of Mike Evans. I have him ahead of Chris Godwin, ahead of Robbie Anderson, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, T.Y. Hilton. I think a lot of times people are like, oh man, like Tyler Lockett is like so inconsistent. It's like, yeah, okay, well, name me one receiver outside of like the top 5 guys that is consistent, aside from T. Higgins, pretty much. There is none. And that's what I want out of Tyler Lockett in my semifinals is that chance at that 40-point week. And yes, the Washington football team is generally good against fantasy wide receivers, but they rank 7th in the NFL over the last 5 games at fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So they're actually giving up fantasy points at a top 10 rate to the wide receiver position lately, which is more important than the whole season, of course. So I'm still willing to start Tyler Lockett as a high-end wide receiver too.
I'd be willing to do Godwin versus him. Then if you have
I like
Lockett higher.
Godwin this week.
Um, Godwin, Cooks, Robbie Anderson.
I have Cooks ahead of him. I'll do Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson I'll do.
Do Anderson versus Lockett.
Cool.
Okay, bet.
All right. How about we let's run through a bit more of these since we're going up a bit more time here.
I have 3 left.
I'll talk about all these guys are in the same game. I'm going to talk about them quickly. Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin I have higher than consensus. AJ Terrell is going to be shadowing Mike Evans, and that is going to mean that Isaiah Oliver and not Darqueze Dennard, but his replacement, because Darqueze Dennard has been ruled out for this game, will be on Godwin and Antonio Brown. On the outside, Antonio Brown plays primarily on the outside in 3 wide receiver sets. So he's going to see whoever Darqueze Dennard's replacement is with Isaiah Oliver in the slot. And then Oliver's probably going to be on the outside in 2 wide sets. AB specifically, as I mentioned, we'll see a 4th string cornerback on the Atlanta Falcons on the outside. So that is a pretty good matchup for him. And not only that, but Ricardo Allen is also out for this game, who's a starting safety for the Falcons. I think the passing game in this one, hopefully for my Tom Brady stocks, is going to be very good in this game. And then on the other side of the ball, Calvin Ridley, 4 spots lower than consensus. Carlton Davis is going to be in shadow coverage against him. And if any of you are like, isn't that the guy that got torched by Tyreek Hill? Yes, it is the guy that got torched by Tyreek Hill. But Carlton Davis is a 4-5 corner, and Tyreek Hill runs a 4-2. Calvin Ridley's pretty fast, but he's not as fast as Tyreek Hill. And Carlton in shadow coverage this year, aside from Tyreek Hill, has been excellent. So I'm going to trust the fact that Calvin Ridley is going to struggle in this game. And I think this matchup, these 2 guys, determines the entire game script of the game. If Carlton is able to shut down Calvin Ridley, then the Falcons aren't going to be able to get much going on offense. And then that means that the Bucs are going to have a lot of time of possession. Maybe they get the run game going. Maybe they get a lot of plays on offense, and that could lead to higher scoring game for Tampa Bay. But if Carlton Davis has trouble with Calvin Ridley, then there's a good chance that this game is more of a shootout that some people might expect. That's not exactly how I see it going. I think it's going to be either one-sided or a close, low-scoring game. But I think this matchup is key. And then Russell Gage, obviously.
I'm going to mention him.
You can talk about him real quick, but I have him 6 spots higher than consensus as well.
I have him 8 spots higher than consensus. You kind of alluded to the fact that Calvin Ridley is going to be facing Carlton Davis opposite of him, according to PFF. I mean, Russell Gage in his last 4 games has had 8 targets per game and averages 10.89 half PPR points per game. Julio is going to be out again for this one. That opens a huge opportunity to operate as the number 2 in this offense behind Calvin Ridley. I currently have him as my wide receiver 32 on the week, and ECR 40 just doesn't make sense to me because, again, this guy with the opportunity brought forth to
I would
him.
definitely start him over a guy like Kiki QT or whatever. Like that.
I would start him over even like a Cole Beasley, a Tim Patrick. We were mentioning
Cole
like,
Beasley, I probably wouldn't start him over, but Kiki QT and Tim Patrick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, you're talking about Russell Gage. I think his upside is through the roof this week. Again, we've talked about Tampa Bay over the stretch here. Now, we'll see the status of Jamel Dean. You're kind of mentioning he's expected to be back in this game. We'll see how that transpires.
The way that it's going to work out is if Jamel Dean plays, then Murphy Bunting goes back to the slot. But if Jamel Dean is out, then Murphy Bunting's on the outside and Ross Cockrell's in the slot. And Ross Cockrell has actually been pretty good in the slot. So I think it's actually a good thing if Jamel Dean plays in this game, because that means Bunting is going to be on Russell Gage. But my thing is, with Todd Bowles' defense, they beat up on cupcakes. And without Julio Jones in the lineup, this offense is a cupcake offense. They are not very good. How good of an offense would you say this is with Julio Jones? Top 16 in the league? About?
Close to top 12, to be honest, with Julio.
Okay, without Julio, they're a bottom 10 offense.
Yeah, easily. I mean,
so I don't expect a high blitzing, heavy pressure, super aggressive defense with a shadow corner who can hold his own against Calvin Ridley to allow a lot through the air in this game. And that's what my concern is with Russell Gage. I still have him higher than consensus, but I know there's a lot of people out there that are very high on him. I think he's kind of a floor play, personally. I think he's a floor play. I don't think he's going to have a huge ceiling in this game, but I think he could catch, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 passes.
Yeah, again, I mentioned his 8 targets per game in the last 4. I think 8 targets in this type of game is probably his floor, to be honest, with Julio out. And
that I understand, but the question is, what does he do with those 8 targets? Because I don't think the offense moves the ball too much.
Turns them 6 for 70, maybe a touchdown. Can give you that.
Possible.
Yeah, but anyways, I'm going to quickly also mention a situation. You mentioned the Bucs situation of receivers. I'm going to mention the Steelers situation. I have Deontay 3 spots lower, Juju even with consensus, and Claypool 3 spots higher. And I mean, the expected coverage is really the difference here. Deontay's expected coverage is William Jackson. Meanwhile, Juju and Claypool have much easier matchups. Again, you guys watch the Cincinnati Bengals, you'll know they have one decent corner on their entire team, and it just so happens to be William Jackson. So if he's expected to be on Deontay Johnson, expect the other 2 Steelers receivers to be able to outperform him. Again,
my thing with Claypool, though, and I talked about this on the start of the show, is that he, like, James Washington and him are like splitting routes now. It's not like Claypool's the guaranteed number 3 receiver. It's like Claypool plus Washington. And to be fair, James Washington's played well. He kind of deserves it, but I mean, it's Chase Claypool. He's clearly the better receiver. That's my only concern with Chase Claypool, is that he's really not running that many routes. I believe he only had like a 44% route participation last week against the Bills, which is definitely not what you want to see. So I have him pretty significantly lower than consensus.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, okay. So say his snaps are toned down to a tune, even when he's on the field. I mean, have you ever heard of LaShawn Sims?
No. I think when he's on the field, he's definitely going to be able to produce. I don't want to bet on him over some of the guys that are more sure bets for at least volume. And I wouldn't play him over Cole Beasley personally, because I think Cole Beasley is guaranteed volume.
I hope you're right, because I'm playing against Claypool in my semifinal, but I just see no way this guy doesn't score a touchdown in this game, plain and simple.
And that's what has to happen too with Chase Claypool. He has to score a touchdown, or else he's not going to.
I think he's going to. I think there's no way he doesn't against LaShawn Simpson. In all honesty, that's why I have him 3 spots higher. I mean, this guy could play 10 snaps in the game. If he scores a touchdown on LaShawn Simpson, one of them, it really doesn't matter at that point.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm going to mention quickly last. It doesn't really have much of a bearing because you're probably not going to start this guy in your semifinal regardless. But I'm going to mention Denzel Mims. I have 34 spots higher than consensus. 34. Yes, you guys read that correctly. He's had 7+ targets in 4 of the 6 games he's played this year. And this is a talented young wide receiver on an 0-13 Jets.
Against an all-pro corner.
I guess that, but I get that. But still, I mean,
I literally said in the start-sit show, don't start a single New York Jet in this game.
I mean, you're not starting him regardless, but ECR has him outside their top 75.
Okay, yeah, as far as rankings goes, but this doesn't help anyone.
Fair. I just wanted to mention him because you're going to have this guy at ECR 79.
Could be I guess he could be like a GPP play if you were playing DFS this week and you had to spend down at receiver.
With Crowder banged up and with a team that's probably going to be down really early to start this game regardless, because, I mean, they have no fucking shot. We could see some garbage time volume from this guy. I don't want to mention garbage time a lot because people like saying that term way too loosely.
And yeah, for those of you that think garbage time is a good thing, You need to be able to move the ball and get first
Yeah.
downs for garbage time to be effective. And in this
Yeah.
game, I don't expect the Jets to move the ball. I bet the time of possession in this game is like 40 minutes to 20 minutes for the Rams.
Probably, but even with that case, I mean, Crowder's going to be banged up in this game. Realistically, who else are the fucking Jets going to even be able to get targets to? You're not going to give targets to Frank Gore. You're not going to give targets
I
to
guess,
fucking
but
Ty
if would
Johnson.
Sam Darnold passing for 120 yards shock you?
Yeah, I mean, heck, if Denzel Mims is catching 65, 70 of those, I'll take
I
that.
guess, but that's a pretty high market share.
I mean,
Anyway,
that's
let's
how
get
bad
into
the
tight
Jets
ends
are.
before we wrap this up.
I mean,
So,
I'm not saying I'm starting him regardless. I mean,
yeah,
this
no,
week,
obviously not. It's just an
ECR
ECR discrepancy. Yeah.
ECR 79 just makes no fucking sense for a guy who's even just a starting wide receiver being wide receiver 79 makes no sense.
Yeah, I
But
mean, he's on an 0-13 team.
anyways,
So.
yeah, fair. But like, what the hell?
Okay, so the usual candidates for tight ends, we always talk about the same guys. Jonnu Smith, he's a boomer bust option, but the matchup is gold in this one. He has the Detroit Lions. There apparently is some weather concerns with this game, so keep an eye on that. When someone told me that, I was like, wait, isn't this game in Detroit and they play in a dome? But it's not. It's in Tennessee and they play outside. So just keep an eye on the weather concerns for that. I still think you're starting A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, but Jonnu Smith probably doesn't become a start if there's weather concerns in this game. Jared Cook, I have 6 spots higher than consensus. Drew Brees is back. That's really all it comes down to. 9 PPR points per game this year compared to 6 when Drew Brees has not been in the lineup, and 11 over the last 2 years compared to 7.5 when Drew Brees has been in the lineup. So Drew Brees definitely likes Jared Cook, especially in the red zone where he tends to look to him. So I think Jared Cook at tight end 13 for me is a viable streamer with Brees back in the lineup.
Yeah, no, I agree there.
And Thomas out too.
The main one I'm going to mention is going to be Irv Smith Jr. Again, we mentioned him a ton. Athletic, phenomenal talent at the tight end position. Kyle Rudolph expected out in this one. And the main weakness of the Bears defense, as I've mentioned in multiple weeks now, has been against opposing tight ends. I don't know why. They locked down on the outside.
This is the trade target of all trade targets, by the way. Yeah. If you are in a dynasty league and you can trade, go get this man, because I will bet you money that Kyle Rudolph is not on the Minnesota Vikings next year. And
you could probably grab
Irv
him.
Smith is going to be a starting tight end, and I'm going to have the exact same arguments for Irv Smith this year or next year as I had for Jonnu Smith last year.
Yeah. You could probably get him for a 3rd round pick in your leagues right now.
Yeah, and I think he could be very well a top 12 tight end next year.
Yeah, I know. I agree there.
He's already almost like a borderline top 12 tight end this week.
For sure. The other 3 guys I'm actually going to mention, I have Jordan Reed 3 spots lower, and this has nothing to do with Reed himself. I just prefer some other options. Again, Irv Smith, Logan Thomas.
I have Logan Thomas 4 spots lower, and it's for the exact same reason. I just prefer some other guys.
Same thing with Cole Kmet. I like Cole Kmet a ton. I think he's a really good player. But again, with that kind of split we saw with Jimmy Graham and him, that's just a factor in my opinion. Guys like Jared Cook, Dalton Schultz, Jonnu Smith, I would just rather prefer. Not that I hate Cole Kmet. Again, at the end of the day here, outside realistically the top 6 or 7 tight ends, it's a crapshoot, and really I can see those rankings go any way. And I mean, I can mention Mike Gesicki having him 40 spots higher, but I'm assuming ECR is expecting him not to play, so yeah, I'm not going to mention it much. And Tyler Higbee, I mean, I have him lower than Gerald Everett because Gerald Everett's overall just been a better player over recent weeks, so why would I rank him higher than Everett?
Yeah. Hayden Hurst is the last guy, and then we can get out of here. I have him 4 spots lower than consensus. The reason is because he goes as the offense does. When Julio's on the field, Hayden Hurst is actually better for fantasy. It doesn't matter his target volume. His target volume is higher when Julio is on the field because the offense moves better when Julio is on the field. So no Julio is no bueno for Hayden Hurst. I don't think he's startable in this matchup.
Yeah, that's fine. As well, I actually have him right around consensus, but I understand the point of having him a lot lower. Again, Hayden Hurst has been so inconsistent, especially with Julio outside of the lineup. So you make a very valid point. Anyways, we're about 55 minutes deep here. We're trying to keep it under an hour for you guys. If you enjoyed this video thus far, if it really helped you set your lineups for those semifinal dates, make sure you go hit that like button. And as always, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We're on our road.
We are going to be live tomorrow or today, I guess, as you're seeing this Saturday around 3 o'clock, 3:30, or no, the games are at 4:30. So we'll be live around 3:30, 3:45. So if you have any start sit questions about the Saturday games or about the Sunday games, or just want to talk football in general, make sure you guys tune into that.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we're at about 2,250 subscribers as you're seeing this. We're on that road for 2,500. We want to hit that by the new year. If we can hit 2,500 by the new year, we'll be pretty excited about that. So if you're enjoying the content, help us out, help us reach that goal. YouTube algorithm, as always. Anyways, see you guys tomorrow.